G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of the Bamboo History Podcast. I'm your host Stephen, and for those of you who don't know what the Bamboo History Podcast is, it is a podcast on Chinese and East Asian history. Today, we're bringing back another food special episode. Hooray! It's been a while since I've done one of these, so I thought, let's bring the food episodes back, because everyone loves food, right? Everyone will be familiar with today's food item, as it is ubiquitous in Chinese and more broadly, Asian cooking. Get ready folks, it's time to hear about the history of soy sauce. Before we get into this episode, just a reminder, if you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe to my podcast and also follow my Instagram, visit my website, and check out my other content that I'm going to make on TikTok. I'll leave all those details in the description box below. Firstly, what is soy sauce? Soy sauce is a popular food used primarily as a cooking ingredient and as a condiment. It is dark in colour and has a salty and sometimes sweet taste to it. Soy sauce is a byproduct formed through the fermentation process of soybean and wheat, and its dark colour is an outcome of the release of sugar during the fermentation process and then subsequently an exposure of these sugars to intense heat. Although sometimes additional food colouring is also added to soy sauce to give it its colour. Soy sauce making methods vary, but generally the process involves combining cooked soybeans and wheat grains with molds to begin the fermentation process. Then, salt brine is added to the mixture to ferment further before the mixture is pressed to produce the liquid condiment that we call soy sauce. Hence, the primary ingredients for soy sauce are soybeans, wheat, and salt. Soy sauce can be used for a variety of purposes, such as sauce. Wow, that was obvious, like the word sauce is literally in the name. For example, it can be used as a dipping sauce for sushi. Seasoning. Soy sauce can be used as seasoning for example, stir-fried dishes where you add soy sauce to add flavour to the dish. And soy sauce can also be used as a marinade or glaze. Soy sauce is mostly used in Asian dishes, but that doesn't mean that people can't use it for other, non-Asian dishes. I mean, why can't we put soy sauce in a kebab? Or in a plate of pasta? Okay, now that you all know what soy sauce is, let's go on and talk about the history of it. In order to talk about the history of soy sauce, we need to talk first about the origins of its main ingredient, and that is soybeans. Well, what are soybeans? A soybean is a legume, which is a term that refers to all types of lentils, beans, pulses, and peas from the Fabaceae or Leguminosae family. Other types of legumes include chickpeas, kidney beans, mung beans, peanuts, and of course, soybeans. Soybeans were first cultivated by the Chinese in the 11th century BCE, some 3,000 years ago, and was first consumed as a food product by the 10th century BCE at the earliest. During the Zhou dynasty, the soybean became known as one of the 5 sacred grains. The 5 sacred grains being wheat, barley, rice, millet, and soybean. In modern times, soybeans themselves are not commonly consumed directly, as we are more accustomed these days to eat products prepared from soybeans, such as tofu, soy milk, and soy sauce. However, soybeans during that period of time was consumed directly. As raw soybeans are indigestible for humans, they were boiled first before consumption. Sometimes the leaves from the plant were also consumed. At that stage in history, soy sauce was unheard of. However, the Chinese did start making sauces and pastes, which would eventually lead to soy sauce. In Chinese, the word for soy sauce is 酱油, spelt Jiangyou. The first word of that phrase, 酱, was the predecessor of modern-day soy sauce. 酱, spelt Jiang, can refer to either a sauce or a fermented paste. During ancient times, jiang took the form of a fermented paste rather than a sauce. Jiang was originally created by the Chinese to preserve food items, and jiang was usually made by fermenting meat, vegetables, seafood, and grain. The earliest records of jiang were discovered in manuscripts found in the famous Ma Wangdui tomb. Ma Wangdui spelt Mawangdui, and it was a tomb of a noble family that had lived during the Han Dynasty in the 2nd century BCE. This suggests that by then, fermented paste was used by the Chinese. The grains that were used to make jiang were initially rice and wheat, but soon after, soybeans also became an ingredient as well. In the 1st century BCE, during the year 40 BCE, a book, 急救篇, was written. 急救篇 spelt Jijiupian. In this book, it describes that soybean paste is made by mixing soybeans and wheat flour, creating a paste known as doujiang, which literally means bean paste. But it wasn't just the Chinese that were fermenting soybeans. A few hundred years later, there were records that Koreans were also doing the same thing. In the book Records of the Three Kingdoms, which was written during the 3rd century CE, it was recorded that the Koreans were good at, quote, brewing fermented soybeans. And in Korean, fermented bean paste is known as doenchang. Back in China, it would take hundreds of years later for doujiang soybean paste to be used commonly as a cooking ingredient. This is evidenced by a detailed recipe of soybean paste in the book Qi Min Yao Shu, spelt Qiminyaoshu, which was written during the 6th century CE. By this time, Japan had also joined the soybean paste party. Between the 6th and 7th centuries CE, Buddhist monks brought soybean paste to Japan, where the Japanese developed it into their own version of paste, which they called miso, spelt miso, which became commonly produced and used in Japan by the 10th century. Stephen, you have talked about soybeans. You have talked about soybean paste. But what about soy sauce itself? Well, it would take over 1,000 years after the creation of soybean paste before we would see soy sauce. The earliest reference of the modern-day soy sauce we now know of came during the Southern Sung period, between the 12th and 13th centuries, where it was referenced in a cookbook called the Shanjia Qinggong, written by a poet called Lin Hong, spelt Linhong. Listeners who are regulars may be familiar with the name Lin Hong. That's right, he is the same Lin Hong that recorded the first ever hot pot dish, which I covered in episode 14. Tune into that episode if you've got time, it's a banger. Lin Hong writes in his cookbook that soy sauce could be used in dressings for vegetarian ingredients that included garlic chives, bamboo shoots, and ferns. And in this book, he makes numerous references to the phrase 酱油, which is, as you know, the Chinese term for soy sauce. I wonder if he put any soy sauce into the hot pot that he was eating. Meanwhile, in Japan, they had their own separate discovery of soy sauce. In 13th century Japan, a Zen monk was hanging around barrels of soybean miso paste when he noticed that liquid was being collected in these barrels of paste. Presumably, the monk had a little taste of it. Ooh. Then realized how flavorful it was, and probably told everyone about it. Hence, Japanese soy sauce came into being. The Japanese soy sauce was and is different from its Chinese counterpart. They would make soy sauce using an equal portion of soybeans and wheat, compared to the Chinese version, which was just to use soybeans, or to use soybeans as the main portion. This meant that Japanese soy sauce was sweeter than the Chinese version, which was saltier. In fact, the English term soy sauce is derived from the Japanese word for soy sauce, which is shoyu, spelt S-H-O-Y-U. Japan also established the first commercial soy sauce brewery, and there's a cool backstory to it. In the 17th century, two shogunates, who are military commanders, were vying for power to control Japan, with one of them, the Ieyasu shogunate, finally taking the upper hand. The decisive blow came in the year 1615, when the Osaka castle, the stronghold of the rival Hideyoshi shogunate, fell. The samurais fighting for them were finished, but the wife of one of the samurais, a woman named Shige Maki, spelt S-H-I-G-E M-A-K-I, manages to escape with a son. She later changed her last name to Mogi and became a successful businesswoman, opening up a cottage industry producing soy sauce. It has been purported that several founding members of the famous Japanese food manufacturer Kikkoman Corporation have claimed that they were descended from Shige Maki or Shige Mogi. In China, since the Southern Song period, recipes using soy sauce were popularized more and more, and by the Qing dynasty from the 17th century onwards, soy sauce became the most important condiment used in Chinese cooking. Sooner or later, however, soy sauce would also spread to other parts of the world outside of East Asia. In the year 1737, 75 barrels of soy sauce were imported from Japan to Indonesia. Then a Dutch colony, half of these barrels were then shipped from Indonesia to the Netherlands, with soy sauce setting foot in Europe for the first time. This kick-started Western obsession with soy sauce. In my home country in Australia, the first soy sauce product, named Fine India Soy, was sold in Sydney in 1804. There's also a rumour that Britain's famous Worcestershire sauce, created in the early 1800s, was influenced by soy sauce. Is it true or not? I don't know. If anyone knows, please leave a comment. Soy sauce might look like a simple condiment, but even in modern times, it has still undergone developments. In China, from the 1990s onwards, the southern province of Guangdong began differentiating soy sauce into two types: light soy sauce, or sheng chou in Chinese, and dark soy sauce, known as lao chou in Chinese. Yes, whilst the colours of both are different, with dark soy sauce being darker. The main difference is down to the fermentation process. Light soy sauce is fermented for a shorter period of time than dark soy sauce, resulting in the soy sauce being lighter. This also means that darker soy sauce is thicker, has a darker colour, and also tastes sweeter than light soy sauce, which is saltier. And generally, with most stir-fried dishes, people prefer to use light soy sauce. Today, soy sauce is known to many people around the world and consumed everywhere. Many popular brands of soy sauce include Kikkoman, which we talked about earlier, from Japan, Lee Kum Kee from Hong Kong, Sempio soy sauce from South Korea, and the Pearl River Bridge soy sauce from Guangzhou. So yeah, that's it. That's the end of this episode of the history of soy sauce. Apologies for anyone who thought that you're going to get a free bottle of soy sauce in this episode. Unfortunately, I'm not sponsored. But if anyone wants to sponsor my episode or my podcast, please, by all means, contact me. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, follow my Instagram, follow my TikTok, and visit my website. I'll leave all those details in the description box below. Okay, I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna go into the kitchen and chug a liter of soy sauce. Thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and I'll see you all next time on the Bamboo History Podcast. Bye for now.